What's up YouTube? This is Dennis Panuta for tutorials.eu. In this video we are going to build a quiz game. And why are we going to build it? Well, we're going to build it because a bunch of you hit that like button on my Android Masterclass. So if you haven't checked out the Android Masterclass, please do so now. It's an 8-hour long course about Android development. And that's also what this quiz is going to be in. So it's not going to be with Unity, it's going to be built with Android and Kotlin. So Android Studio and Kotlin to be precise. So in this video you are going to build a full quiz app that you can then load on your Android phone and play, or you can share it with your friends so that they can check it out. And by the way, the whole video is made in a way so that you can very easily learn how to adjust the application so that it becomes your own quiz. So you will know how to change the UI so that it fits your preference when it comes to looks. You can change the questions that are asked and of course the answers that are given. And you can basically create your own quiz app. So I have already seen some of my students do that. So some of my Android Masterclass students, you can find the link to the whole course in which you are going to get a 45-hour long Android Masterclass course in which you learn everything you need to know about Android to pretty much build any app that you can think of, where you will also learn how to use Firestore and create an app such as Trello, and how to create a weather app, how to create a 7-minute workout app, all the good stuff. All right, so you will become a real Android developer if you go through that course. So please check out the link in the description. You get a massive discount using the link. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can build a very cool quiz app and share it with us so that we can check it out and give you a 5-star rating potentially if it's great. All right, so I hope you enjoyed and have fun building this app. And I forgot the most important thing of all, hit that like button and the notification bell next to the subscribe button, also the subscribe button next to the notification bell. All the good stuff, because this indicates that you are interested in Android content, which makes me create more Android content. So it's really depending on what you do, what I will do. I hope that was correct English. So enjoy the video.
Welcome to this quiz chapter. In this chapter we are going to build a little quiz app which allows us to learn a bunch of new functionality that we have not used so far. And we are also going to use very important concepts that are really generally important to understand when building any software, pretty much. So not just apps, but generally when building software. All right, we're going to start with this little screen that you can see here where you can enter your name. So I'm just going to enter my name in here. I'm going to press start and then the quiz starts. So it's going to be a very basic quiz app, but this will still teach you a lot of new features. So let's get started. You can see here what country does this flag belong to. Then we have a little image here, a progress bar here which indicates how far we are in the process, and then we have a bunch of options here at the bottom. For example, this is Argentina, so I can submit and I get a result here which indicates whether my answer was correct or not. Then I can press go to next question and the next image pops up with the next question, which is the same question. So in this case, I'm always using the same question just with other images and other responses or possible options here. And this is going to be a blueprint of an application that you can just build your own of. So you can just go ahead and make your own quiz app from it. And you can just create 100 questions, for example, and then just build this little app based on what you will learn in this chapter. All right, so let me select a incorrect answer here. So I'm going to say this is Austria, even though that's Australia. So I'm going to press submit. And as you can see, Austria is red because that was my initial answer and Australia is going to be correct. All right, so going through this, I will in the end have a screen which will tell me how many times I was correct with my response and so forth. Oh, that was actually Fiji, good to know. Germany, then we have Denmark, India, This should be New Zealand. and that's a tough one. So actually it was Kuwait. All right. And there we are. So you can see your score is 7 out of 10. And that is our congratulations or our result screen. And then we can press finish, which leads us back to the home screen. Now you can of course go on and try to build this yourself, at least the UI from it. And that would already be quite a good step to get started and to practice and learn. And then of course we will build this together in this chapter. So I'd say let's start with this screen in the next video. See you there. Welcome back. In this video we are going to start with the start screen or the main activity of our application of the quiz app. So let's get started with this empty activity when selecting a new template for the project. So I'm just gonna press next here and going to call this one quiz app. Everything else can stay the same. API should be 21 and then press finish. So let's test this application on our device just to directly see what we already have. So this is the app that we have right now, and let me turn it around. As you can see, it's not turning. That's great because that's exactly what I wanted. I don't want it to turn, but if you really want to make sure that it's not going to turn, you can go to your Android manifest and then add a new setting here to your activity. And when it comes to the screen orientation, you have many different options here. You can read through them in the documentation. The one that I want to use is the portrait one, so only the portrait orientation will be accepted in my application. So here, I'll just add a screen orientation setting, and I'm going to set that to portrait. Now, even though it's complaining, I'm still going to leave it as that because it's still going to work totally fine. Then I would like to assign a theme here, and the theme that I want to use is one that I will create myself because I want to have control over the style of this action bar there at the top. And how can I do that? Well, I can go to my values, and then there is this style XML file in which I can create different styles. For example, you can see there is one style already, which is a dark action bar, and now we can create a light action bar as well. So I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to create a new style here, which I'm going to call no action bar theme. And its parent is going to be theme.appcompat.light.no action bar. So this will be the parent theme. So we are going to pretty much use this theme here, but we're going to adjust it slightly. Okay, so the things that I want to adjust here are the colors. So as we can see here, there are 3 colors which are set in there, and I want to do the same here. Now you might wonder, why would we even do that? Well, the thing is, I would like to have no action bar in my main activity. So here, this main activity, our first screen, should not have an action bar at the top. But still, if I use this theme as I define it here, so when I now go ahead and use my no action bar theme that I just created, which is in my styles, this one here, when I use that, then it still needs the default colors. And these are the default colors. So the color primary will be used from our colors, which in there is also called color primary. Our color primary dark, which we set for this theme, will be defined in this color primary dark. So even though the names are duplicative, it's still very important to distinguish. So in this style, we can define those 3 colors, but we could choose different colors here for this particular style. Okay, but we're going to use still the same colors as we would use in a default theme that we have here, but we are going to use the parent, which is the no action bar style. Okay, and if we still want to have an action bar, then we can go back to our default theme that had a dark action bar at the top. So coming back to our manifest, you can see it's complaining here because we need to add style and then the no action bar theme, this one here that we created ourselves. And then the next thing that I need to assign here is to add the Windows soft input mode. And here I'm gonna use adjust resize. So what that will do is it will resize our UI so that when the keyboard comes in, so the soft input, which means the keyboard of Android, when that comes into play and is visible on the screen, that our UI will be resized, adjusted and resized so that it still fits on the screen and still looks good enough so that we can still see where we are actually entering a value. There are multiple options that you have here. You can see state visible, adjust resize, and so forth. So multiple different options, and what they pretty much do, how the main window of the activity interacts with the window containing on-screen soft keyboards. And the setting for this attribute affects two things: the state of the soft keyboard, whether it's hidden or visible when the activity becomes the focus of user attention, and then the adjustment made to the activity's main window, whether it is resized smaller to make more room for the soft keyboard, or whether its contents panned to make the current focus visible when part of the window is covered by the soft keyboard. Okay, because sometimes when the part of our activity that is relevant for the user to enter data, for example, a text field where he needs to enter something, so an edit text, and the soft keyboard is on top of it, then you cannot see what you're typing. And that's something that we want to avoid. All right, coming back to our project here, there's one more thing that I would like to set up for this video, and that's going to be our Gradle. So in our Gradle scripts here under build Gradle in the module app, that's where I want to add another dependency. So I want to use the dependency of Google, which is the material design. So here I'm going to add implementation apostrophe com dot google.android.material colon material colon 1.0.0. All right, so this is what we need in here. And once you enter a new dependency, what you need to do is you need to sync now. So this feature here with the dependencies is a pretty powerful tool. So we are adjusting our Gradle, and it will then download necessary dependencies and the necessary code, so to speak, that we can then reuse. So it's going to download libraries for us, which we then can use. And in this case, we're going to use the Android Material Design library. All right, so that's just the preparation for the next video, in which we are going to then set up the whole style of this activity main XML file, because currently the only thing that we see in here is this hello world text view, and I would of course like to change that and create a beautiful screen in here. All right, so see you in the next video. Welcome back. In this video we are going to build this screen that you can see here, where we have this little text here, then another text, an edit text, and a button here which is inside of a card view. So this part here, which is white, this white background, is a card view. So at this point, I think you should be able to build this UI yourself. At least try to build it. Give it a try, pause the video, and then try to build this yourself. And then of course you can check out the video how I have done it. All right, so I hope you tried it. Of course, you would need this background image here and the color. So that's something that you could have gotten from the project itself, or of course you could have used another image as the background. But generally speaking, the rest should be something that we have seen already multiple times. So let's just build that inside of our activity main. So something that I didn't tell you, and that was on purpose, is that I don't want to use a constraint layout, because everything in our UI is built on top of each other. And that's why I think it is much easier to use a linear layout here. Of course, you could have used a constraint layout and drag all of the UI elements that you need inside of this view, but I personally really prefer the code because you are much preciser this way. And let's go ahead and use a linear layout here. And then of course we need to adjust some settings here for this linear layout. So I'm going to set the gravity to center so that everything is centered on a horizontal way. And then I'm going to set the orientation itself vertical, so that everything is on top of each other. So now if I go ahead and duplicate this text view, then I will just have two text views which are on top of each other, as you can see here. All right, so that's what we get through using a linear layout where the orientation is vertical. Now, as the background of this, I want to use a beautiful image, and you could have downloaded this image from the course. So I'm also going to just paste it into the drawable folder. All right, now let's see how it's gonna look. And actually, I haven't set that up yet. So here, that's going to be at drawable ICBG. That's the one. Now let's look at it. And we can see we have the background already. And then I want to use this quiz app text, or have this quiz app text there. So let's implement that. It's going to be a text view. It's gonna match the parents in terms of its width, wrap the content in terms of its height, and I'm going to give it an ID so that I can talk to it if necessary. So here, ID @ID TV underscore app underscore name. So TV standing for text view. Then I don't need to have all of these constraint elements because we're not using a constraint layout. So let's get rid of all of them. As the text, I would like to use something like quiz app. Then I want to have a little layout margin bottom, so some space towards the bottom of, let's say, 30 density pixels. As the text size, I'm going to use 25, so 25 SP. Then the text style should be bold, so you can also see that this text is pretty bold here. And as the text color, I'm going to use white. So text color is going to be @Android:color/white. All right, let's look at it. Right now, it's just going to be this text here. And yes, you can see it's not centered. So I would like to center it. How do I do that? Well, I use the gravity here. So here, Android gravity center. Let's look at it again. And now the text is centered. Underneath it, I would like to have this card view. As you can see, there are multiple different elements inside of this card view. For example, welcome, please enter your name. So text view, added text and button. So let's get rid of this text view here and instead add a card view in there. And that one is from Android X widget card view. Here the width should be match parent, so it should take the whole width, and the height should be wrap content, so it should only take as much height as it requires. Then I'm going to assign some more settings in here. So for example, I want to have a little margin towards the top, and I get that by using margin start here. I'm going to say it should be 20 density pixels. Then also some margin towards the end, which will be 20 density pixels, so it will be towards the right hand side. And then I'm going to set the background to a white color as well. So here, Android color/white. Now what you also can see here is that this card has rounded corners and that there is a little bit of shadow that this card creates. You can barely see it, but still, if it's not there, you will see the difference. So currently the card is empty. That's why we cannot really see it, but let's add the card corner radius in here, which I'm going to set to 8 density pixels, and the card elevation, which will create this shadow of 5 density pixels. Now let's fill this with some values in there. So I want to have texts on top of each other, as you can see here. So I will need a linear layout with the orientation being vertical. So let's create that. Linear layout with the width of match parent, with the height of wrap content, with the orientation of vertical, and the padding, because I want to have some space inside, so a little bit of padding of 16 density pixels. Now in here I would like to have text views. So let's go ahead and create a text view here, which has a width of match parent, a height of wrap content. So you can see it's most of the times like this, wrap content, and then some more settings here. For example, the gravity should be that it's centered, so the text should be centered. The text should be something like welcome. So I'm going to set that to welcome. The text color. And here I'm going to use a color 363A43. And it will be this light gray color here, or maybe even dark gray actually, dark gray color. And the text size is going to be rather big, so 30 SP here. All right, so let's look at it. We can see this is our card. So we have a little welcome text in there, which is this dark gray. And we can unfortunately not really see the shadow that we create, and we can also not see that it is rounded. So if we test our application, then we will see it. Okay, but first let's add the other elements in there as well. So that is one of the texts, and it's not completely done. So I'm going to set the text style to bold as well here, so that it's thick and white. All right, now let's copy this text view and paste it just underneath it. It's going to be pretty much the same text view here. And then we have one minor change here to make, and that is to please enter your name and then maybe also the color. So I'm going to use a slightly different color here. I'm going to use 7A8089, which is a lighter gray, as you can see. The text size should be significantly smaller. So when we look at the example here, you can see this text is significantly smaller than the other one, and it's also not bold. So let's get rid of that as well. And now let's look at it again. You can see welcome, please enter your name. So we can see that quite well already. So the next thing we need to add is an edit text, which is this field here. Now, in order to use it in the right format and right style that I want to have, I'm going to have to use something from the material design, and that is a text input layout. So text input layout. And you can see it's the second one in my case. The width should be match parent again. The height should be wrap content. And then I'm going to set up some more things in here. So I'm going to give this a little margin towards the top so that there is some space in between this field and the text views that we have there. And then I'm going to give it a style. So there are multiple different styles that you can assign to such a text input layout. And I'm just going to use the style, which is going to be add style widget material components dot text input dot. Then you can see there are multiple options here. Unfortunately, they are too far off. So let me see it like this. So outline box is what I want to use. So it's this one. So if we check that out, we cannot see anything in there yet because we don't have an actual added text in there. So this text input layout is just a preparation for our actual added text. Now the thing is, I could of course use the added text, but I want to use the app compat added text, which will work on all the versions just the same way as well. So app compat means app compatibility, so it's going to be compatible to all the versions as well. So it's going to just adjust accordingly to the version that the user has installed on his phone. So the Android version. All right, here the width will be match parent again, the height will be wrap content, and then what we need to set up is a hint. So I'm gonna assign the hint to be name. At this point, we should be able to see something. Once we close this bracket here, we should see that here is this app compat added text that is in there. Unfortunately, we don't see the hint yet. That's something that we would see once we run the application. Now, as the text color, I would like to use the same text color that we had here, this dark text color, for my edit text. So here text color will be hash 363A43, and then as the text color of the hint, so you can even define that, I want to have this lighter color that we had, so this one here. Let's now add the final part of this UI, and that is the button. So let me create a button down here inside of this linear layout at the very bottom. And we of course need to define this button. So I'm going to give it an ID so that we can communicate with it. And I'm just going to call this one button start. And then the layout width and height will be match parent for the width, and layout height will be wrap content. So it's going to span over the whole width as this button does. So inside of its parent, it's going to span the whole width here. Then, as you can see as well, it has a little margin towards the top. I'm going to assign 16 density pixels here, which is this distance between those two elements here, because otherwise they would be too close to each other. And then I'm going to assign a little background color, which will be the color that we have in our primary colors. So color primary. And finally, the text of it should be start. Now let's run this and then make some adjustments on the way. All right, so there we are. It's almost the same. There are some minor changes here. You can see that this background is a little different, and then the color of the start text is a little different, the size of it as well. So let's define another text size here, which will be 18 SP, and the text color, which will be white. So I'm just going to use Android color/white. All right, let's run it again just to see the changes. And there you can see now the text is white and it's a lot bigger, and we're almost having the same kind of effects that we had in our other example. But what you can also see is that the whole UI pops towards the top once we click onto our edit text here. You can see because the keyboard comes up, and that is due to our settings in the manifest, where we set the window soft input mode to adjust resize. All right, coming back to our activity main. Now, of course, you can play around with all the values, and here our card view that we're using. For example, here the corner radius, you can see it's set to 8 density pixels. So let's say we set that to 50 density pixels. Let's have a look at how our UI will look. You can see it's significantly more rounded. All right, so this is the radius that you can assign here, and I had it at 8 density pixels. All right, so I think at this point we have a great UI from which we can go to the next screen, and once we click the start button, we should go over to the next screen. There's a last thing that I would like to add though, and that is to get rid of our bar there at the bottom, at the top, this status bar. So if you want to get rid of the status bar in your application, because it has its advantages, of course, but in some cases it really just doesn't make the app look as good as it could look, then you can go to the activity settings here in onCreate and set up your window.decor view.system UI visibility and set that to view.system, and hereby you need to import view. So let's do that real quick. Import, and here it's going to be .system UI flag full screen. Now let's test it again. And you can see there at the top, the system UI is gone. All right, so I hope you managed to build at least some parts of this UI yourself. And in the next video, we are going to set up the model and a bunch of other things that are required for this application. So see you there.
Alrighty, so now you are roughly half an hour into the video and you've built the first parts of the application. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to learn more about Android app development, please check out the link in the description, because there you will get a course which is 45 hours long. The length is also high quality content, right? It's not just 45 hours of BS content. It's really good stuff. You're going to become a real Android developer by taking the course, by taking it seriously, by working yourself through it, and by applying what you will learn there. And that is amazing, because you can find the job then, you can start building your own apps and make money off of that, or you can just make an application for free for your friends or for everyone to use and just put some ads in there so you can start making money with it, whatever you can think of. All right, so please check out the link in the description. You get a hefty discount by clicking on it, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the video, and I hope to see you in the course, of course.
Welcome back. In this video we are going to implement a second activity, and we're going to prepare something inside of the activity. So let me just enter a name here, press start, and then you can see we get over to this activity. So that is the goal of this video, but on top of that we are going to prepare what will be displayed in here. So not the UI itself, but the data. All right, so let's get started. First of all, let's create a new activity. So here, right click, new activity, and I'm going to create an empty activity, and this one will be called quiz questions activity. All right, let's create it. And for this one I want to have the same UI settings as for my other activity. So I'm gonna go here and I'm going to copy that. Well, we don't need this resize part, but the other two I want to have in there. So the no action bar theme and also the screen orientation should be portrait for this activity as well. So our quiz question activity. And actually at this point having an action bar isn't such a bad idea, because then we can potentially go back. So let me get rid of this no action bar theme here. All right, so that's the first part of this activity. Then the next thing that I need to create is a validation that the user has entered something. So if we go here, I want to have a validation. So if we press start and no text was entered, then I want to let the user know with a little toast. So let's go to our main activity, because that's where the magic happens. And then let's get the button start, which is this start button here. And once we click on it, set on click listener, I want to execute some code. So first of all, we check if our edit text et_name dot text to string is empty. So here et_name is of course going to be required. So where is that from? Well, let's go over to our resources, because here in our layout activity main we had this card view in which we had this text view and so forth. But what's important is this edit text compat. So here we need to create an ID which will be et_name, because now we can access it and see if there is an entry or not. So what I'm saying is the text to a string empty? So is it actually an empty string in there or no text inside of this field? And if that's the case, then I want to inform the user about that. And I'm going to use that therefore this toast feature. And how you can do that is you enter make text, and then it creates this toast.make text. And here you need to pass in the context. So it will be inside of the context of our main activity. So it should be shown in the same screen. Then we need to enter the text that should be displayed. So please enter your name and then the length of the toast. So toast.length short. And finally, we want to show this, of course. So overall, it's going to look like this. Toast make text, please enter your name, toast length short, dot show. Now let's test that. So let's click on start when it's empty, and you can see, please enter your name. Let me enter something there and press start again. And now you can see nothing happens. But of course, at that point, we want to move over to the next screen. So we want to move over to our quiz questions activity. So let's just do that. Let's say, okay, if the text is not empty, so this edit text, then let's create an intent which will move us over to this other activity. So we create a new val intent, which will be of type intent. And here we need to import intent with Alt Enter. We need to say from which context we want to start, and this will be this class here, and then to which class we want to move over, or to which activity we want to move over, and here it will be the Java file. So here ::class.java. Now at this point we of course need to start the activity, and that is done with start activity with the intent that we prepared. And we can also execute finish here, which will close the current activity. So we move over to the other, but we at the same time close this activity right here, which is our main activity, because in the end we want to be inside of the quiz until the user is done, and then we come back to this page or to this main activity. All right, and now let's prepare our questions. So we have questions in every quiz, right? And that is the most important part pretty much. So let's go ahead and create a new class which will take care of that. So I'm creating a new Kotlin file class, and I'm going to select class here, and this one will be my question. So I will define how every single question is going to look like. Now the thing is, this question class will not have any specific features and functionality. The only thing that it will have is data information. So it will know about the question text, so to speak, the image, then the different options that there are, and which one of the options is correct. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do that with a data class, because this question class doesn't need to have any function. So it just needs to be a very basic data class. So I'm just going to say I need to have an ID of type integer, so that I know which question I'm currently looking at. All right, and then you can, of course, now go ahead and add all of the other features that we want to have inside of this question. And by the way, these need to be brackets. So not the curly ones, but the rounded ones. So I want to have the ID. And then what else would I want to have? Now try to think of the different variables that we need to have here when creating a question. All right, so we need the question itself, so question, which will be of type string, then the image, which it's uncommon, which will be of type int. So I'm going to assign an integer to each image, then option 1, which will be of type string, option 2, option 3, and so forth. So all of the 4 options that we have, so option 1, 2, 3, and then finally I need to know which one of those 4 options was correct. So val correct answer. You could have called this correct option as well, but I'm just going to call this one correct answer, and that will be an integer. So I'm just going to store the value 1, 2, 3, or 4 in there in order to know which one of those is correct. All right, and then of course I need to have all of the questions, and there are multiple different ways how you can do that. You could have an XML file or a JSON file which contains all of the different questions, but in our case we are going to work with constants. So we're just going to create a new file here, a Kotlin file, which I'm going to call constants, which will just be a file, and we're going to use object and call this one constants. So in here I want to have all of my constants, and the thing is I will create one constant which will contain all of the questions. So fun get questions which is going to be a constant, but it's going to be a function which returns all of the different values. So here we're going to say that it's going to return an array list of questions. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use this getQuestions function in order to get all of the different questions. And what type are they? Well, they are question type, and they are in an array list. So basically I want to have an array list which contains a bunch of questions. And every single question needs, of course, to have all of this information here. As you can see, we need the ID, the question, the image, the options, and so forth. So inside of this getQuestions, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, okay, let's create this questions list, which is going to be an array list of question. And for now, it's going to be empty. But then I'm going to fill it up. So for example, question 1 will be of type question. And then I'm going to assign an ID. And as you can see now, I need to assign all of the different values. So the first question will have the ID 1. It will have the question, what country does this flag belong to? And now, of course, you could say, okay, the question is always going to be the same. So why do we even have this question in there? Well, the thing is, this is a blueprint for you. So if you decide to adjust the questions, then you can do so freely. All right, so it's not necessary for this specific example, but it's going to be super great for your own applications. So then the next thing after the question is the image. So we saw here in our question KT that we have the image as an integer. Well, that one is a little confusing, but the thing is that our drawable dot, and then, for example, our background that we used is in fact of type integer. So it's going to return an integer. So now, of course, I don't want to use the background, but I want to use other images. And you can get the images from the course. So you can download it inside of the course, and they're attached to this lecture. So I'm just gonna paste them all in here. You can see it's all of those images here. I see flag Argentina, Australia, Belgium, and so forth. So now, of course, we can use the image that we just downloaded. So for example, I see flag of Argentina, which will be this one here. And you can also see it here on the left-hand side. Okay, so the next thing that we need to pass is option 1, then option 2, option 3, and option 4. All right, so let's enter some options here. For example, Argentina, which is the correct answer, then Australia, and then option 3, which would be, for example, Armenia and Austria. And then finally, we need to tell which of the answers is the correct answer. So is it option 1, option 2, option 3, or option 4? So I'm going to say it's going to be the number 1. So here it's going to be the value 1, which means Argentina is going to be the correct answer. So let me bring that into a more readable format. And now you can see that we have all of the different values that we had for the question KT here. So for our data class. So now our question itself is correct. What is missing though is, as you can see, this getQuestions function should return an array list of questions. So let's add this question that we just prepared to our questions list. So questions list dot add, and in here we add our Q1 or question 1, and then we return our questions list. And with that, our function will be happy, so no more errors. And now, of course, we only have one question. And now, instead of boring you with all of the different questions that we need to put in here, I'm just gonna copy them from the prepared code that I have here. And you can, of course, copy it from there as well, so that you don't have to type in all of the questions manually. Okay, so I'm gonna put them just underneath the point where I add my first question. So in here, I'm gonna put all of the other questions. And now at this point, you could be creative and create your very own questions with your own answers and your own images. Okay, So feel free to do so. Now there's one important thing left to do so that we can actually see if that worked. So if we can actually work with the questions that we have there, and that is not going to be to display them yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new questions list variable here, which will be from my constants dot get questions. So here we had this constants class, or it's not really a class, it's an object, right? It's an object which is available from everywhere. That is the power of it. So I can just go ahead and say constants get questions, and it's going to give me all of the different questions that we had. And now we can test if that worked by using a log statement. So I'm going to say log I. It's going to be questions size, for example. How many questions do we have in there? And the message should be that it's questions list dot size. All right, and at this point we will be able to see how many questions there are. So let's run this and see if the logcat is gonna offer the information. Therefore, you need to open the logcat here at the bottom, set that to verbose, and enter questions, because otherwise there would be way too much information here. So if you enter question, you can see it's filtered. And now let's go to the next screen, and we can see question size is 10. All right, so the questions are there. We can get them to this activity, to this quiz questions activity. So that means that we can now go ahead and populate our screen accordingly with this information. All right, so let's go to the next video where we're going to do that. Welcome back. In this video, we are going to build this UI that you can see here. So we have a scroll view. So this whole thing is inside of a scroll view. Then we have a linear layout so that elements are put on top of each other. And then here, those two elements here, this is a progress bar, which has a text view next to it. So this is another linear layout where we are using the orientation horizontal instead of vertical. And of course, these 4 buttons. And then at the bottom, we have one more button. But these 4 buttons, by the way, they are not buttons. They are text views. So I'm using text views here. So if you want to build this UI, you can do so yourself. Of course, you may not forget that we have a text here at the top and an image view here as well. All right, let's get started. Let's go to our activity quiz question. And as I said, this is going to be a scroll view. So scroll view. And I need to add the viewport setting. So fill viewport, I'm going to set that to true so that it fills the whole viewport. So the idea is that this will still look good on super small devices and will still work on very small screens. Now, of course, inside of the scroll view, I have my linear layout, which has a match parent width and a wrap content height. And inside of this linear layout, we want to have all of our other elements. So what's important for the linear layout is to know the orientation. So let's set the orientation to vertical so that things will be on top of each other. I want to have a little bit of padding towards all directions. So that is visible here. You can see there is a little distance towards all directions here, these 16 density pixels. And then I also want to center elements. So as you can see, they are centered here. All of the elements, they are not pushed towards the left. So in order to get there, we need to set the gravity to center. All right, so that's our linear layout. Inside of this linear layout, first of all, we had a text view here at the top. So let's create that text view. Text view, which has a width of match parent and the height of wrap content. And I'm going to assign an ID here so that we can access it. So I'm going to give this ID the TV question ID. Okay, so that's how I'm going to call it. Then I'm going to give it a little margin towards all directions so that it has a little distance. And that will be 10 density pixels. I'm going to center the text. So I'm going to get the gravity to be centered. Then we need to have a specific text color here. The text color I'm going to use is 363 3A43. So at that point, you can see we reused this text color multiple times. So at that point, you could go ahead and save that inside of your values colors XML. All right, so now it would make sense at this point. So if you want to, go ahead and do that. So text size, of course, needs to be set. So 22 SP is going to be fine. And then the text itself. So what country, and this is just a default text. Later on, we are going to override it with the question that we have in our constants KT. And it's going to be the same question, but still, we still need it here. All right, so that's our text view. And then underneath that, we have an image view. So we have this image here. And I'm gonna create an image view in here, image view with a width of wrap content and a height of wrap content. Then a margin towards the top of, let's say, 16 density pixels, a source, that's the most important part, and that's actually our image that we want to use. And I'm going to use Argentina here, or you could use any color or any flag that you want to use here. And then because we want to access it, we should give it an ID. So I'm going to give it the ID IV image, because we want to change this image through code. And if you want to do that, we of course need to assign an ID to it so that we can access it. All right, the next thing that we have here is a progress bar. So you can see this is a progress bar, and then we have a text next to it. So if you want to have both of them and you want to have them next to each other, you need to have another linear layout. So you can see we create a linear layout within a linear layout. And this one will match parent in terms of width and wrap content in terms of height. And then it's going to be this linear layout which holds our progress bar and another text view. So I'm going to assign some more variables here. So let me assign those real quick here. We can see we have an ID. LL progress details is how I'm calling this, a linear layout. We have a little margin. I'm setting the gravity to be centered vertically. And the orientation, that's the most important part, is horizontal. So now the two elements, or all elements that are inside of our linear layout, will be next to each other. So as I said, I want to have a progress bar in there. So let's go ahead and create a progress bar. Now this progress bar should have a width of 0 density pixels. And what is 0? Why does it make sense? Well, the thing is, we are going to use weight here. So we're going to use the layout weight property, and I'm going to show you in a second. So then the height will be wrap content. So it's only going to take its own height here. And then you can see it's complaining. So the width is complaining. That's because we don't have the layout underscore weight yet. And I'm going to assign 1 to it. And you see the arrow disappeared. So at this point, because there's only one element in our linear layout, it would take the whole width. So it would take every bit of available space there. Then I'm going to set the maximum value to 10, even though we could then, of course, access that later on and assign the value via code. So if we want to access it via code, we need to give it an ID. So let's call this one progress bar. I'm going to set the minimum height of it to 50 density pixels. So even though it's going to wrap its content, it should at least be 50 density pixel high. And then the default progress. So the progress at the start, you can set that via the progress property. And I'm going to set that to 0, because it should start at 0 and then it should fill up each time that we get to the next question. Then there are 2 more settings that I want to set for our progress bar. And one of them is to make indeterminate false. So we can set the value to false if we want to make it a determinate progress. So determinate mode for the progress bar when you want to show that a specific quantity of progress has occurred. So here, for example, you can see determinate progress bar that is 25% complete. So the progress is set to 25. So I'm going to set indeterminate to false. And then finally, I want to assign a style or define a style that I want to use. And here it's going to be Android, and here not the at sign, but the question mark. At question mark Android attributes, and then there is the progress bar style horizontal. So I want this to be a horizontal progress bar style. And then underneath I want to have a text view. So I'm just gonna paste in the text view here. And by underneath I mean underneath the code, even though in the visibility or in the view it will be next to each other. So the text view will be next to the progress bar. You can see now this is the text view that we have here, and this is the progress bar. So this is how the UI currently looks, because we haven't filled it up completely yet. But you can see here that the text view has an ID so that we can access it, because we need to change its text. Currently it's 0 out of 10, but later on we will fill it up each time or increase the value each time that we answered another question. Then we set the width and height to wrap content. The gravity is centered. We have a little bit of padding, 15 density pixels, so a little bit of distance there. And the text color hint will be this gray color, and the text size will be 14. So that we then in the end get this element here. All right, and underneath we have 4 times this text view here. So this is not a button, this is an text view. So let's go ahead and use text views here. And I'm just gonna paste them in here because they all look the same, and I'm gonna go through one of them for you to see. So it has to be in between those two closing linear layout brackets, because it's underneath this linear layout, but it's inside the greater linear layout, which is our second highest parent, so to speak. All right, so let me put that in there. So what I want to use are 4 text views, and they are all the same, pretty much. The only difference is, of course, the text that they will display and the ID that they have. All right, so the ID in this one is TV option 1, text view option 1. They're going to match the parent in width, use only the height that they need. The margin should be 10 density pixels so that they are slightly apart from each other. Then I'm using a default option border background. So what this is going to be my own drawable resource. So let me create this file by hovering over it. So what you can just do is you can set the background as add drawable, and then just create a name that you have not created as a drawable yet, and then hover over it to create this resource file. And then you can just leave the default, and we're going to implement this file right now. So what I want to have is a shape. So basically I want to shape my text views so that they appear like buttons. And you can do that with the power of XML. So you can pretty much create your very own design by using XML files. All right, and what I need in here is to assign the right shape to it. So here I'm gonna say that it's gonna have the shape of a rectangle. So this text view here is a rectangle. It has a certain background, which is white, as you can see. And then it has this little gray stroke that surrounds it. So what we need to do is we need to create all of that. We need to say, okay, I want to have a stroke surrounding it. I want to have a solid background color, and I want to have rounded corners, because you can see, even though it's rectangular, it has rounded corners here. So let's do it one by one. Let's create the stroke first. So I want to create a stroke in here, and the stroke will have a certain width, and I'm gonna say it's just 1 density pixel thick, so it's a super thin stroke. And then I want to define the color, which will be a very light gray. So it's going to be E8, E8, E8. So this is going to be, as I said, a super light gray. And then I want to have a white background color. So if you want to have a background color, you use solid here, because it's a solid background color, which is part of the shape. So here I'm going to use add Android color / white. And then finally, as I said, I want to have rounded corners. So I'm just going to say the corners should have a radius of 5 density pixels. And that will then create this rounded corner shape that we have here. All right, so this is going to be how this shape allows our text view to look like. So going back to our activity quiz questions XML, now the error disappeared and it accepts this background here. So you can see there are our buttons and they are rounded and they have a white background and a gray stroke that surrounds them. Then I centered the text, so I'm setting the gravity to center so that the text is centered inside of the text view or button, however you want to call it, even though it's not really a button. I have padding so that it makes the whole button bigger. So this padding is taking care of this distance between the text itself and the stroke that surrounds it. So here it's 15 density pixels between Argentina, so this text, and the stroke towards the bottom and towards the top. And then we set the text color to be gray and the text size to be 18. And of course the text in the tools would just be, in this case, Apple, in the second entry this Google, and so forth. So you can see they are all the same. The only difference is this tools text. And by the way, tools is just for us to see it in this design overview here. So if we want to look at it and see it here, so it's just to see it inside of our IDE. It's not going to be visible in the application itself during runtime. And then of course they have different IDs. So one of them is TV option 2, TV option 3, and TV option 4. Okay, so now there is one last element to be added, and that is this submit button here at the bottom. So let's go ahead and add that there as well. It's inside of this linear layout, and it's just a regular button this time. So we're not only using text views as buttons, but you can see the possibilities are limitless. You have a lot of options how you can do that. All right, so layout width is going to be match parent, and the height will be wrap content. So we've seen that multiple times before. And then what's important for buttons is that they get an ID, because we want to be able to click on them. So submit should be the ID. And then we need to define the layout margin so that we have a little bit of distance towards all directions. Then the background, and I'm going to use the color primary that we have. Okay, so it's this purple color. Then the text should be submit. The text color should be white. So if we look at it, currently the text is white, and as you can see it's also bold. So let's make it bold as well. It's a little bigger than this text, for example. So it's 18 SP. So the color will be Android color / white, and the text size will be 18 SP, as well as the text style will be bold. And now at this point, the colors, they don't look like the colors here. So in our app, if we run it, they don't look the same. We don't have those exact colors. So let's change those as well. And we can do that in the colors XML. So it's inside of your resources folder, then values, and then colors.xml. So the colors that I want to use are 9013FE for the color primary. The color primary dark is 6A1B9A, and the color accent will be the same as our color primary, even though we're not really using it, but in some cases internally this color will still be used, so that will be important. And before running it, I'm of course missing something in the color here. So when creating a color inside of your default option border BG XML, or in general when using XMLs, you of course need to have the hashtag at the beginning of the color name. All right, so let's go ahead and run it again. Okay, so there we are. So you can see the hint now also has the right color. So that was an error before, or a mistake that I had in there yet. And there we are. So you can see, of course, that the text is not really filled yet, so it doesn't display anything. But other than that, we can see that our UI is there. Of course, the texts are still missing. And of course, we have to assign all of those values in our quiz questions activity. So we get the data from our questions list, so please go ahead and try to assign all of those values. So pause the video and try to assign the relevant information or the relevant values. So for the progress bar, the TV progress, the questions, the options, everything. Quick hint, you will need to have the current position that you're looking at. All right, so I hope you tried it. So val current position is going to be 1. So we start at 1, the first question. And then the question that we're currently looking at will be of type question nullable, which we assign to questions list at the current position -1. So why do I use -1 here? Well, that's because the current position is set to 1, because that's how we named our constants. So the first question, we gave it the ID of 1, but internally, this is the 0th index. So it has an index of 0 inside of this array list, because as you know, array lists start counting at 0. So that's why we need to use the current position -1 here in order to get 0 as the first entry of our questions list. And then at that point, we can just go ahead and assign the progress bar. So we're just going to say progress bar dot progress is going to be the current position. So it's going to be our progress bar here at the top. We called it progress bar. So we gave it the ID progress bar. So I'm just accessing this thing here and I'm assigning the progress 1. And then TV underscore progress dot text should be our current position plus slash and the progress bar maximum. So progress bar get maximum or get max, and that will actually just be max. And then accordingly we need to set the text of the question. So TV question will be text is equal to question dot question. So the question is the current question that we're looking at, and every single question object has a question string. Okay, so not to confuse you, but that's how we called them here. Then we need to set the image of iv underscore image dot set image resource, and that one will be question dot image. So that's how we can set the image resource. I think that was the most difficult part of trying this little exercise. Then we have TV underscore option 1, option 2, and so forth, and we need to assign texts to them. So text of the TV option 1 will be question dot option 1, and so forth. All right, so let me paste them in here, and there we are. Okay, so at this point we can run the code again and see if everything will be populated accordingly. All right, so let me enter my name, and there we are. So what country does this flag belong to? We have Argentina, or the Argentinian flag. We have our progress bar, which is set to 1 because we are at the first question. And then we have all of the 4 possible answers, as you can see, in the same style, and then at the bottom we have the submit button. All right, we covered a lot this video, and we finally brought everything together. So we brought the model that we prepared and the UI together to display what you see here, and that is super powerful. So what's happening here is really powerful, and it's also a very important approach that you will need many different times. So using objects is very strong and very powerful. So that's what we're doing here. This is the model that we created, and now we use this model over and over again, and that is a big part of object-oriented programming. All right, I'd say let's move on to the next video. Welcome back. In this video we are going to set up this activity here, our quiz activity, quiz questions activity to be precise, and it's going to have the functionality where we can select one of the options, and it will have a different appearance once we selected it. As you can see, there is a stroke here which has a different color surrounding this text view, and it's a lot thicker. So what we will need to do is to also reset that for all of the buttons, or in this case it's text views, but then set it for the one that we click on, because we don't want them to stay all active, so to speak, after we clicked on another one, for example, if we change our mind. In order to create this functionality, we need to first of all create such a background color or such a drawable for our button. So we had this default option border, but now we also want to have a selected option border. So very similar to what we have here. So we can just go ahead and copy that, and then we can rename it selected option border. And here we need to make a minor change. So here the color will be color primary, that one here. And then we could of course also change the width, but maybe it doesn't make sense. So it really depends on what you prefer. But I think for now this is going to be fine. So now we just change the color for the selected option, and now we can go ahead and use that. So let's go back to our quiz questions activity. And here we are going to require several variables. For example, we need to know which question we currently are at, then the questions list, and then which option is selected. So these are very important variables. If we look at it, you can see the question, well, in our case, it's always the same question. So it wouldn't be that much of a problem here, but still, if you each time have different questions, then you of course need to take care of that. Then we need to know the questions list in order to have the questions in general. So to even know which questions we should position at the right spot. And then of course the options that we have here, as well as the selected option. All right. And the questions list will of course contain the information about the different options, because a list of questions is a list of our model that we created. So of objects of this model that we created, which is called question, as you might recall, which has the question, but also all of the options, the image, and the correct answer number. All right, so let's go ahead and create those variables first. So private variable, which I'm gonna call mCurrentPosition, which is going to be an integer. And I'm going to assign 1 to it, because each time we get to this activity, we should start with the first question. Then I'm gonna have a variable for the questions list, which will just be an array list of questions. So of our question object that we created. And for now, I'm just gonna set that to null, because I will need to initialize it later on. So inside of the onCreate, and then private var mSelected option position. So I need to know which option the user has selected. So for example, this one, option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4. So then I can go ahead and then check if the answer is correct. So why did I make this null? Well, because I need to have an object that I can use in order to set this questions list. Okay, so what we did before was we created this variable, but only locally. So it was only visible inside of this onCreate. So it's not in the scope of the whole project. So we changed that now, and we are going to use this mQuestions which is our global variable here that we created, that we can now go ahead and use. All right, so this log request will not be required anymore. And then also this part here is also something that we just created for testing purposes. So we will need to change that, of course, as well as pretty much this whole part. So we want to put that into a function which will take care of that. Okay, so we could go ahead and create a function for this, which I'm gonna call setQuestion. And in there, we're pretty much going to do the same thing as we've done here. So let's go ahead and put that here. Of course, we now need to change the variable names, because we had this global variable called mCurrentPosition, as well as the questions. We get them from our mQuestionList. So here we're just going to say mQuestionsList. And by the way, we assign it here. mQuestionsList get the mCurrentPosition -1. So it's pretty much the same code that we had before, and here we can also directly use the approach, as you can see, so you don't need to use the get function here. All right, and then of course the progress bar should be at the mCurrentPosition, because now we're not using the local variable that we had before, but we're using this global one, which we have here. All right, and this one of course will also be the mCurrentPosition accordingly. All right, the rest can stay the same for now. And of course we need to go ahead and call this questions or set questions method here in onCreate. All right, the next thing that we need is a function which will take care of assigning the default layout for our buttons, which they have by default when we get to the screen. So we could either go ahead and start with defining the color here, or defining this background that we used for the selected button. But the thing is, each time that we click this button or click on any of the buttons, we also need to make sure that all the others are default. So what we can do is we can make them all default and then change the one that we have selected. Okay, and in order to do so, I think it makes sense to start with the function that makes them look default first. And that will make more sense once we do that. So private function default options view should be val options array list of text views. So you can see we can even create array lists of UI elements or of view elements, as this text view is one. So what I want to have is the different options that we had. And the different options are our text views here. Text view option 1, text view option 2, and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign them to my options array list by saying add. And then I'm going to assign an index, and this one will be tv underscore option underscore 1. Then options add 1 tv underscore option 2, and so forth. All right, so we need to add all of the options that we have here. And as it is with arrays, we start at 0. So with array lists, we start counting at 0. And options add 3 tv underscore option 4. All right, now we can go through a for loop, or create a for loop, which will go through all of the different options and which will assign the default user interface or the default UI for our button, which is this default drawable that we created. So this default option border, which was just this white or slightly gray border which surrounds the buttons. Okay, so let's do that. Let's run through a for loop for option in options. I want to go ahead and set the text color to be colors or color dot parse color, and it should be the gray color that it was by default. So it's not in here, it's actually in our activity quiz color. So here we had this color here, which is this gray color. So I want to use this same color here. All right, so this is the default color. If you look at the button, you can see that this is the default color for the text, and we want to set that because you can see when it's selected, the color is not the default color anymore, but it's this black. All right, so we need to make sure that we set that accordingly. Then another thing that I want to set is the typeface. So option dot typeface, is going to be typeface dot default. So what is this typeface? And I need to type it correctly here, like this. So the typeface, set the typeface and style in which the text should be displayed. So we just set it back to the default typeface, so the default appearance, so to speak. All right, and then I need to assign a background for my option. So option background, and what is this background? Well, it's our drawable that we created, which is this default option border BG. In order to set such a border BG in this case, so such an XML file, we can use the following approach. So context compat get drawable, and then we need to pass in the context, which is this, so in this class, and then the drawable that we want to use, and it's in our resources folder, so we use R. Then we get it by going to the drawables folder, so you can see here it's inside the drawable folder, and in there we have a file called default option border BG. That's the file that we created, so this one here. So we just assign it for that now. All right, and that's already it for our default options view. Now the thing is, each time we set a new question, what we also should do, we should set the default options view just to make sure that all the buttons are back to the default appearance before we then later on select one of them by clicking on them, for example. Now, of course, all of our buttons should have an on-click listener so that we can click on them. So I'm just gonna say TV option 1 dot set on click listener, and I'm gonna assign this to it. Then TV option 2 should also have an on-click listener, which I'm gonna assign this to, and so forth. Now you can see that this is not accepted here, and that is because our class, our quiz questions activity, is not a click listener. So we can add that by using the following line in a second. So let me just finish that. On click listener for all of our 4 buttons, and then I make this class an on click listener. So on click listener. So now you can see once you do that, the class is complaining because you need to implement the members. So we need to implement this member, which is the on click method. So let's implement that, and you can see now we have this on-click method here, which we can now define. So what do we want to do once the user clicks on the button? Well, we want to select it. You can see we want to make it selected as we have it here. So it should have another color for the text. Then it should have another color for the background, which is our other r.drawable. So it's just this other XML file that we prepared. All right, so we could of course do that in the on-click each time, but we can also prepare a function which is going to take care of that. And I'm just going to call this function selected option view. So let's go ahead and create that private fun selected option view, which needs to have a text view. So text view, and then the selected option number, which is of type integer. All right, so we need to know which option was selected in order to do the right thing. All right, so here, first of all, what we will do is set the default options view. So we reset everything to the default. Once I click on something, you can see this one is reset. So Armenia, for example, this button is reset to the default view. And this Australia also is for a short moment still default, but just a second later, then we set this design that we had set before. So now we pretty much need to assign that this button that we currently have clicked on is going to be our selected options position. So the selected option, this one here, selected option number, is going to be our new selected option position. And then the next thing we need to do is similar to what we have done here, where we assign the typeface and everything. All right, but this time it's not for the option itself, but it's for the text view that we are looking at. Okay, so let me copy that and put that in here, because now it's not the option as I said, but it's the text view that is passed to this function. Okay, so there we are again, and TV. Now, of course, I want to use a different color here, so I'm just going to use 363A43, which is also this black color, or dark gray color, which we have used before. So by this I set the color of our text, and then the typeface. In order to change the typeface, you can do it the following way. So you can say that you want to set the typeface by saying which typeface here and how you want to set it. Typeface dot bold. So I want to make the text bold, so that's how I can do it. And then the background, of course, is now not our default options border, but our selected options border, which is this XML file that we prepared, which has this purple border or purple stroke which surrounds it. All right, and now there's just one thing left, and that is to use this function. And we're going to use it in the onClick here. So we can use a when here, when v.id is r.id.tv underscore option1. What shall we execute in that case? Well, I'm just going to say selected option view is going to be rv. And then we also need to say which is the selected option number, and it's going to be 1. Now rv is a view, but we actually expect a text view here, so actually what we can say that it's our TV option 1, which is of course this text view here. So we can directly pass a whole text view to a function, which we then can use. Okay, and that's what we do here. So now we call this function that we created. We pass in the TV option 1, which is this text view that was required, and then we pass in the number, in this case number 1 because it's option 1, here as the selected option number. And then it goes through this process here. So it says, okay, let's reset all the buttons, then select or use the option that was used, so in this case 1 as the selected option position, then set the TV text color to be this dark gray color, set the text to bold, and set the background or the border of the button to be this extra drawable that we created. And of course we need to do the same thing for all the other buttons as well. So here we go ahead and say, what if it's r.id.tv option 2? So if the second option was clicked, then I want to also call the selected option view, pass in TV option 2, and pass in the value 2 as the selected option here. And of course for the other buttons as well. So TV underscore option 3. When that one is clicked, then we also want to say selected option view TV option 3, and the value is 3. And finally the last button, which is r.id.tv option 4. And when that is clicked, we select option view TV option 4, 4. So this is just another way of doing it as we would have done in our onCreate, where we could have set the onClick listener and implemented the code directly here. That would have been an option. But as you can see, there is another option to use buttons, and that's to set the onClick listener in the onCreate, make the class itself, follow the structure of an onClick listener, and implement the onClick event here. So what we're doing here is we are implementing the onClick listener to our class quiz questions activity. And now at this point we can test it, and we will see that we get the same functionality as in the demo that I've shown you before. All right, let's test it. Start, and then let's click on the buttons, and as you can see, They are beautifully set to default, and then also the one that we click on is highlighted. All right, perfect. So we have prepared the buttons, but we also have prepared the selected options and the questions. So we went a little further, and that's what we're going to keep on improving in the next video, because the submit button of course doesn't do anything yet, and that's what we of course still need. So see you in the next video. Welcome back. In this video I would like to add the functionality that allows us to see if an answer is correct or not. So for example, this is the flag for Argentina. If I select Australia here for example and I click submit, you can see that the background color is red and also the text is fat here because that's a selected answer, and then this green one is the correct answer, or would have been the correct answer. And you can also see that the submit button now works, and once we click on go to next, it goes to the next question. And also here we have, for example, let's say I select Australia here, that's the correct answer, so it's going to give me the correct background. So what I need is a background which is going to be green, and then another background which is going to be red. So green for correct and red for incorrect. And that is something that we quickly can set up. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go to my resources. Inside the drawable folder, we have this default option border, which I'm just gonna copy and paste once again. And I'm going to call this one correct option border BG. And what I'm going to change in here is that I don't need a stroke. So it's still going to be a rectangle, but I don't need a stroke. And the only thing that I want to have is another background color. So here I'm going to use the default color holo on the screen green light color, which will be this light green. This is the correct border. And now let me duplicate that correct option border BG once again, and this one will be the wrong option border BG. And here the only difference is that we are going to use holo red. So holo underscore red, and here also the light color. All right. So I don't use a stroke. As you can see here, there's no stroke surrounding it, so no border. It's just plain background. And now, of course, I need to find a way to set those accordingly. So I want to set the buttons accordingly. And that's what has to be done in the questions activity. So the first thing we can directly do is in the onCreate function, we can give our button submit the set on click listener here. And we're going to pass in this. And then we could, of course, go ahead and assign the submit functionality in here directly. So we could just go ahead and say r.id. And the button was called button submit. So once we press that, what shall happen? But the thing is, we have nothing prepared there yet. So we will need to also be able to assign the right color for our background. So for the background of the button. And therefore I'm going to create a new function here, private fun, and I'm going to call this one answer view, and it needs to know the answer, so the int of the answer and what it should draw. And I'm going to call this one drawable view, which is also going to be an integer because the drawables that we have are internally stored as integers. Okay. And now I can check when the answer is 1, then I want to set my TV underscore option 1 background to be context compat dot get drawable. And where do I get the drawable from? Well, first I need to pass in the context and then the drawable view, and that is going to be the integer that is passed to this function. Okay, so this function is really just going to take care of assigning the right color, so the right background, to our options. So if the answer integer is 1, then it will be setting the TV option 1's background. Okay, now we need to do the same thing for the other options that we have. So same code pretty much, TV option, only that it's not TV option 1, but it's TV option 2, and so forth. All right, so here it's 3 and 3, and here it's 4 and 4. All right, so that's our answer view function. And now when we press submit, what we see here, so let's say this is of course Brazil, but I select Belize here and I press submit, then the correct answer gets a color and the incorrect answer gets a color as well. So this is incorrect. In our case, if we had an incorrect answer selected, then it will be red. And if we had a correct answer selected, it will be green and nothing else will be colored. But if we have an incorrect answer, then of course the correct answer will also be colored in green. So that's what we will need to do once we press submit. So here inside of our on click, that's where the RID button submit functionality is to be implemented. So here I check if the M selected option position is 0, then I want to go ahead and increase that by 1. So increase the current position. And why would I do that? Well, why would I even have this situation where the selected option position is 0? Because the selected option position by default is going to be 0. Here it starts with 0 because we haven't selected anything. So once we have selected something, the value will be overridden, of course, and we will accordingly move on with our code, right? But if it's 0, then I want to go to the next question, so to speak. Okay, and that is done with this position, or it's handled with this position. So I increase the position by 1, saying that I want to go to the next question. Okay, so the selected option position will be of course checked and changed once the user presses on any of the other buttons, and then it will be assigned. But at the same time we will reset that, so the selected option position back to 0 once we are done with coloring everything and letting the user know if he was correct or not. Okay, it's a little confusing, but as soon as we get there, it will make a lot more sense. All right, so if we press submit, then there are multiple things that we need to check. So first of all, we need to check when the current position is less or greater than the questions list size. If that's the case, then we want to set the next question. So we want to go ahead and pretty much reset the screen. So when we click on this button, you can see now the question has been reset. So the question text has been changed, the image has been changed, and of course the answer options have been changed as well. So that's what happens in the set question function. And then otherwise, so if that's not the case, so else, what I want to do is I want to write a toast here. For now, make text, which is going to be you have successfully completed the quiz. So at this point, we later on want to display the finish screen, so to speak, or result screen. So you have successfully completed the quiz, which should be displayed for only a short period of time. .show. All right, so that's our toast here. Nothing fancy, but a general toast. And we will replace that later on. All right, so this is our when here, but we had another if surrounding it. So here at this point, that's where I want to have an else. So if we do not have M selected option position 0, it means that we have an option position. So the user has selected an option. So what we need to do is we need to create a question here, which will be our M questions list. get m current position. So we want to get the question at the current position minus 1. All right, so as we know, the questions list is an array list. Array list starts at 0, so we want to have the first entry or whatever m current position currently is. So if it's, let's say, 5, then we want to have the 5th entry, which is our index 4 inside of our m questions list. All right, and that's our question. Now we can check if the correct answer that is inside of this question, so question correct answer, is not equal to our m selected option position. And here it's correct answer and not correct answer. And if that's not the same, then we know that we have selected the wrong answer. So what answer view should do is it should take the selected option position and draw it accordingly. So drawable dot, and here it was the wrong option border background should be set. So the button should be red pretty much. So if we selected the incorrect answer, that's what happens. And in any case, what we want to happen is that our answer view with the correct answer is also set. So question correct answer r dot drawable dot correct option border bg. Because if you look at it, this one here, for example, is Belgium. So if I select Belgium, then Belgium will be green no matter if it's correct or not. Okay, or if our selection is correct or not, of course. And in the next example here, let's say I select France, even though this is, I think it was Fiji, then you can see that my incorrect answer was selected red, or the background was set to red, as this if statement here does. But the correct answer is set to green in any case. So it doesn't have to be inside of an if and else statement, so to speak. Of course, in the greater scheme of things, it is inside of this if else, but not in terms of when we are at the right spot in our code. And then when we are at the last question, we want to make sure that the button here at the bottom changes from go to next question to submit. So what we can check here is m current position is equal to the m questions list size. Then the button submit text should be finish, and otherwise it should be set to go to next question. Now at this point, we have gone through the whole process of assigning the correct color and so forth, and we go to the next question. Okay, so once we click on once again, you can see we go to the next question, because here we set the question. But the thing is, that will never happen if we don't set our selected position back to 0. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going to assign 0 here. All right, and then there is only one last thing to do, and that is to set the submit button accordingly. So you can see we have go to next question and submit, but this is not what we have in our program yet. So we need to set that accordingly, and that is each time that we set a question. So we need to go to our function set question, which is rather far up in my case. So here in set question, after we set the default options view, what we can do is we can check if the current position is equal to the questions list size. And if that's the case, then change the text to finish, and otherwise set the text to submit. So button submit.text is going to be submit. So each time we have selected the answer, you can see the text is changed to go to next question, but we need to set it back to submit, and that's what happens here. Except of course we are at the last screen, then we just want to display finish. All right, And now at this point, we can test our application and see if all of that is actually implemented as we expected. All right, there we are. Let's test it. So let's see, Argentina. Okay, answer is correct. Go to next question. And as it seems, we're not moving over yet. So let me select Argentina once again. So we need to make sure that we're actually moving over. And you maybe spotted it. It's exactly this one here, M current position. So we had that earlier for testing purposes, but now it's in our way. So we need to get rid of this line and now test it again. Because what it did is it always, when it set a new question, it set it back to the question number 1. So it's never gonna give us the right question, right? So it's never gonna give us the next question, so to speak. All right, let's test it again. Let's enter a name, let's press start, and now select Argentina, submit, go to next question, and you can see everything works as intended. So we can go through our application as intended. Let's make a mistake here. As you can see, it's still gonna work. And then of course here, if we make a mistake, let's say I say this is Georgia, I can still change it back later on and go to the next question. So we still have this functionality, but I wanted to really keep it super simple. So if somebody wants to trick the system, he can do so. You could of course create an additional helper variable which takes care of the user just answering once and not being able to change the answer afterwards. And that can be done by just simply checking each time that the user presses a button if he already pressed a button inside of this question. So when set question is called, you could have this variable check here. All right, I'd say let's go to the next video. Welcome back. In this video, our goal is to create this UI here, this XML file. And of course, we also need a new activity, which is going to be the result activity. So this is what should be displayed in the result activity. And for now, the goal is just to create that and also to have a variable which knows how many answers we had correct, or how many correct answers we selected. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. So if you want, you can of course try to build that yourself. So you can pause the video and just go ahead and try to build that UI. You will of course need to have the image. You can download it from the lecture, and then yeah, good luck with it. All right, otherwise of course I will show you how to do it. So let's go ahead and create a new activity here, which will be an empty activity, and I'm going to call this one result activity. Once it's ready, let's go to the manifest and adjust the activity accordingly. So I want to have the no action bar theme and also the portrait orientation for my result activity. So I'm just going to add that here. And then we can go back to our quiz questions activity, because here what we needed is a variable which knows how many times we have answered correctly. So let's create one, private var m correct answers. It's going to be an integer, and which is going to be set to 0 at the start. And when do we want to increase that value? Well, each time that we assigned the green button as the option. So each time that we had a correct answer here. So pretty much we had this if statement where we checked if we were incorrect, and if we weren't incorrect, then we can increase the correct answers by 1. So we are inside of our onClick function here for the submit button when we had the correct answer check here. And if it was correct, then we increase by 1. So pretty much what we say, if it wasn't incorrect, then we increase by 1. Now in this video, because we have already created so many different UIs, I'm just gonna keep it super simple. So I'm just gonna paste it in here, and I will talk over what the activity result XML looks like. So what we have is a linear layout, and it matches the parent in both directions, so width and height, and it has a certain background, which is our drawable ICBG. Then it's centered horizontally. The orientation itself is vertical, so things are put on top of each other. We have the padding of 20 dp, so a little bit of padding in all directions. And then we have a text view here saying result, which is bold and has a text size of 25 sp. It's white text. The margin towards the top is 25, so it's not all the way up, all the way at the top. So that's the idea behind it. And then there is one very important part missing, and that is this image view here. So you can see I need this IC trophy. So what you can do is, of course, you can download it from the resources and go over to your projects, to your resources folder, drawable, and then paste it in there. And once we paste it in there, we can see that it appears here. So in this case, the device that is by default used here is this pixel in my case. All right, so this is how it's going to look like in the pixel. That's why I only have this IC trophy PNG, which is the size MDPI. But if you want to have all the different sizes for the different screen sizes, so to speak, then you should of course import the whole folder. As you can see, there are different sizes here. The low density pixels, medium, high, extra, extra high, and extra high. So it's going to adjust accordingly to the screen size if you have all of those in there. In my case, I just kept it simple for this video, so I'm just using the IC trophy PNG. But otherwise, of course, import the whole folder here so that it looks fine on different screen sizes. So for example, if I now go over to this screen size, you can see it's pushed towards the top a little bit because the image is not that big. All right, so it really depends on the screen size that you look at. All right, so that's our image view, and as you can see, it wraps the content. We have the content description of image, and then underneath we have a little text view saying congratulations, and it says, hey, congratulations, which is white, 25 sp, bold text, so it's this one here. Then we have the username, which is another text view. You can see it's not as big. It has 22 sp, has the same margin towards the top, also wraps content in both directions. Then we have the text view, which says your score is 9 out of 10. And it's important that this one has an ID so that we can override it. And it has less margin, as you can see here. So the margin is not as big as it was here. And then the button, finally, which also has a margin of 10. So it's this one here towards the top. So they are equally far apart from each other, those three elements, each time 10 density pixels. And then text size is 18 and the text style is bold. And the difference here, as you can see, is the background is white and the color of the text is, in this case, this purple color, which is our color primary. So if we change the color primary, that color will change as well. All right, and in the next video, we are going to finalize this whole thing. So we're going to add some more features that will then finally allow us to get over to the screen, because the screen needs to know how many answers we had correctly and so forth. So we need to put this information over to this result activity. All right, so see you in the next one. Welcome back. Now there is one last thing to do in our application, and that is to finish the result screen. So what do we need on this result screen? Well, we need the username, and we need to have the amount of correct answers and of course the amount of total answers. So these are information that we need to send over to the screen. And where do we get them from? Well, we get the username from our first activity, which is our main activity. And we can pretty much get the other two from our constants variable. So here in our constants variable, we can go ahead and create several new constants, which will be const value. This one will be underscore username. I'm going to set that to being a string, and I'm going to call this one username. Then const value, and here, of course, I'm saying value, but it's a val. It's an immutable variable. So then we have total questions, which also will be a string of type total questions, or at least that's going to be the entry in there. And then finally another variable which will be the correct answers, which will also be correct answers as a string. So why do we even need them? Well, if we go to our main activity now, and we need to open up here the main activity, we can see that we have this intent, and this intent sends us over to this quiz questions activity. So we need to put some extra information into this intent. So we can go ahead and say putExtra. And what do we want to put extra? Well, first of all, we need to have a key, so to speak, and that will be the username that we sent here. So constant dot username is going to be, and what is the username? Well, we get the username from the user entering his name into et name. So we can just go ahead and read that from there. We can just say et underscore name dot text dot to string. So now we send this information over with the intent to the next activity, which is our quiz questions activity, because we move over to this activity by starting this intent, right? So we now can retrieve this information in the next activity, which is our quiz questions activity. So here I'm going to create another variable at the very top, which will store the username. So var username, which will be of type string, nullable, and I'm gonna set that to null for now. All right, so now of course I need to set the username. And how can I set it? Well, I get the username from the intent, so I can do it in the onCreate, because as soon as the onCreate is fired, we already were sent over, and the intent has already sent its extra information which we have put in the main activity. So here we can go ahead and retrieve this information by storing it in our username variable, which is intent.get string extra. And now at which position was the string extra? Well, it was at this position here. So that's the key. That's pretty much the name, not the username itself, but the name of the username key. All right, so it's going to be this one here. So now we get the username, whatever the user has entered in the main activity, over to this activity here, which is our quiz questions activity. Now the thing is, in this activity, we don't even need it. We just need it in the results activity. But the thing is that we have this flow that we move from the main activity over to the questions activity, then over to the result activity. All right, so this is one way to do it. So we send it over with intents each time. Of course, we can also store it on the device each time and override it by using shared preferences. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to send it over to the activities via the putExtra functionality. All right, now we need to find the right spot to move over to the result activity. And that is in the onClick when we click submit. So once we click submit and we move over to the next screen, or we should move over to the next screen, which is here. Currently we have this make text here, but instead at this point we want to move over to the next screen, right? So we need to create a new intent. So let's go ahead and do that. So intent is going to be a new intent, which needs to have the context. And of course we need to import intent. So let's do that. Alt enter to import it. And then we need to say to which screen we want to move over. And here it's the result activity class.java. And here it's the colon twice, so double colon. So that's our intent. Now the intent itself is ready, but the thing is I want to give this intent additional information. So I want to put some extra infos to it. So I'm going to use putExtra here again. You can see there are many different overrides for putExtra, many different options. So either we pass in a string or we pass in an integer and so forth. So we could pass a lot of different information in there, but we just go and use the same function every time. So we can just pass different information. It's going to use the right information every time. So first of all, it needs a string. So here, constants dot username. So we're just going to use the username again to pass it over. And where do we get it from? Well, we created this variable called mUsername, which we created here at the very top. So here the username, and then we filled it in the onCreate here. And now we use it when we press the submit button. All right, so that's our first intent putExtra. Then we need to put some more information extra, and I told you which ones they are. So if we look at our result activity, we can see it's the amount of correct answers and it's the amount of total answers. All right, so let's put this extra information here. Constants dot correct answers, and it's the correct answers variable that we created. And then another intent putExtra where we put the extra total questions. So constants dot total questions, which is our questions list dot size. And now the questions list is a nullable, so we need to force unwrap it here, or force it here. And now, of course, we can start this activity with that intent that we prepared. Okay, so here we put all the extra information. So this is the key, and this is the value, and we have different keys, and we prepared those keys to be constants so that we can always use them with the same name, so to speak, and we don't have to write them here manually, because here the correct answer constant is of course going to be correct answers. All right, so at this point we send it over, and now we of course need to receive it and retrieve it in the result activity. So when we get to the result activity, and that is in the onCreate, that's where we get this information, but we need to use it. So we need to catch it, so to speak. All right, so in order to get the username, we can just create a variable here called username, and we get this from the intent. So get string extra at the position constants dot username. And now we can use this name to set it as the tv underscore name dot text, which is going to be the username that we prepared. So that one here. And what is this TV name? It's our text view in the activity result here, which is this text view called TV name. So this one where currently it says username. So we need to import TV name. You can see here it needed to have this import, which is this one here, and now we can use it. All right, so we set the username. Now we need to set the score text, which is of course going to be dependent of two values. So one is going to be the amount of correct answers, and the other one is the amount of total questions. So val total questions is going to be intent get int extra this time, because if we look at it, here we sent over correct answers and it's an integer. All right, so we need to pass in the right value, of course, and we need to get the right value here. So we're not getting a string as we did before, but we get an int. So get int extra is going to be constants dot total questions. And now val correct answers will be intent get int extra, because the correct answers is also an amount, so it's also an integer. Constants correct answers. Now the thing is, you can see that it's complaining here when you get an int extra that something is missing. And that is because something could go wrong in that process. So if something is missing, then I want to use the default value of 0. So I'm going to do that in both cases. I'm just going to say the default value will be 0. So if for whatever reason the int wasn't sent over, then use 0 as the alternative value or as the default value. All right. And at this point, we can go ahead and say TV underscore score dot text is going to be your score is, and then the correct answer, and maybe I should call it correct answers, out of, and then total questions. All right, so then if we look at our activity result, you can see here we have this finish button. So this button currently doesn't do anything, and it's inside of our result activity, of course. So what would make sense to give this button? Well, I'd say it would make sense to give this button the functionality of when it's clicked that it sends us over to the main activity. So you can of course create an intent and then in the next step use the start activity, but you can also pass in a new intent directly here. So you can directly say this and then send me over to the main activity class.java. All right, now intent needs to be imported here as well. So let's do that real quick. And that should be it. So now we have everything prepared and we can test our application. All right, so I'm going to use my name here, Dennis. Now I'm going to go through all of the questions here. And now let's submit the last two answers. And we can see we get to the results screen. Your score is 10 out of 10. It says Dennis here as we have entered in the first activity, in the main activity. And now let's finish and move over to the main activity. All right, now at this point, of course, we can still go back because we didn't finish this activity, but that's something that you can of course do here as well. So you can just say, okay, finish. Now this will close the activity. Another thing, if we look at this activity, we see that at the top we have the status bar. So of course we can get rid of the status bar as well by just using the same line that we had in the main activity where we said, okay, deactivate this, please. So let's just do that in here as well, and then it will be fine. So testing it again, we will see that those two features now have been implemented. So I'm gonna say test here this time, so it will be a different name. I'm gonna make some mistakes this time. I'm gonna go real quick through this. I wanna make plenty of mistakes, doesn't matter. And then let's finish, and we can see your score is 3 out of 10. Now let's press finish. Close the activity, because when we go back now, you can see we go back to the quiz activity. Now, of course, you could go ahead and say, all right, I don't want to have the quiz activity as well. So maybe it makes sense to go to a quiz questions activity. And once we move over, so once we send this intent here when submitting, we also finish the current activity. All right. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. So we created this little app. Now, of course, you can go ahead and change your constants, which means change your questions. You can change the amount of questions you have. You can change the type of questions you have. You can use different images and so forth. So you pretty much have created a whole quiz app that you can now adjust to your liking and then send to your friends, publish it to the store, whatever you like. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks a lot for being part of this. And see you in the next one.